Welcome back to Dealing with the Devils. It's Jack and JD, and in the 25th game of the season, the Blue Devils beat Georgia Tech 80-69, but that was not without a late second half run where Georgia Tech cut the deficit from 20 to 10. JD, what did you think of this one in a game without Marvin Bagley?
I really liked the enthusiasm, the push. It was to be somewhat expected, but it was there for the first half. You put together a highlight reel of Grayson Allen in the second half, and I would love to be sitting there in the room with all the coaches watching how poorly he played.
Right, yeah, a lot of the Blue Devils, it may look like the first and second half was even scoring-wise, and obviously the second half you can see defensively they clearly were not the same team, and they lost really the intensity and aggressiveness that they had in the first half, and maybe, they had a big lead and they got comfortable, but that's been too often the case with this team where they're unable to take, and play a solid stretch of 40 minutes.
And I hate to keep going back to it, but let's face it, we played the regular season for the ACC tournament and for March Madness. And I do not know if this is a team that truly has the enthusiasm for winning as much as a lot of these players are looking forward to draft day.
All right, fair enough, JD. I do think, it's important to mention the highlights of the first half as the dogs bark in the background. With Grayson Allen, he played extremely well in the first half. I thought he was aggressive looking for his shot. Wendell Carter, I thought, looked a little bit nervous early on, but then he settled in. I think it was, a little bit of nerves playing at home for the first time, but he finished with a double-double. And Gary Trent was himself in the first half, I thought. But then, and I also want to make sure I point out Marquise Bolden, who again played really well in the first half. First couple of minutes there, provided good stretches, and knocked in a couple of hook jump shots. He looks like a totally different guy to me.
Well, that may be true, and I guess, again, it's which team do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about the team in the first half or the team in the second half? Where if they're not going to give intensity, then he might as well play all of his bench players and sit these guys down, because I'm very worried about the play of Trey Duval. Although you and I talked about it, we said that there was a chance, and we liked the idea of bringing Grayson off the bench. And Coach K kind of liked our idea, but instead did it with Trey Duval, trying to think that would bring some energy in as a sixth man.
Right, and the thinking for us with Grayson would just be to get him kind of out of his funk, and we'll see if the Blue Devils continue to stick with Duval coming off the bench. I thought it was an interesting look. It also gave more of an opportunity to O'Connell, who played okay tonight. He didn't really give him much in terms of shooting the basketball, but I thought he gave him good minutes in terms of his energy on the wing. But we'll have to see also what happens when Bagley comes back. There won't be quite as many shots for Grayson again, or Wendell Carter for that matter, who basically doubled the amount of attempts he usually takes, at least in recent games when he went from 7 to about 14. But I will say on a positive note here, JD, the team did shoot 81% from the free throw line, a frequent talking point of yours.
Always one of my lines that I love to follow, and that, but I will remain worried that Trey Duval at the point is the guy that will have the ball, bringing it up in a close game, and he again is at 61% from the free throw line, and could be a problem in close games come tournament time.
Right, and again, he struggled to hit two big ones at the end of the game there. Or he missed the one free throw, it says here. I thought it was two. But he did hit the nice corner three, which he's developed a nice pattern here of hitting big corner threes late in games when they've really needed him to. And so while he doesn't shoot a high percentage, he has hit a few near the end of the game. Now, yeah, go ahead, JD.
Well, I was going to say, if you're looking for a bright spot, and I know you pointed out, Bolden and Delorier, gave us 6 rebounds. Bolden gave us 6 rebounds. But it was watching the end of that first half, you had the sense, and especially the beginning of the second half, when they had gotten the lead to, I think, 26 points, that this was a night that Duke was going to walk off the court with a 40-point win. Instead, here we are struggling, and the fans getting all excited as the lead got to 10, as they chipped away at it and reduced it by 16 points. And so, you just want to...
Look.
Admittedly, we're Duke fans. We want to love the Duke play. There still isn't really a flow there. We're 25 games in.
Right. A lot of the baskets scored in the first half, while the assist numbers tend to, bear out better than I think the flow looks in terms of how they score. Usually, if they're able to get a bucket off an assist, it's a 2-man game, versus if you watch Spurs basketball and the ball kind of skips around the perimeter, you would never see that in a Duke basketball game this season. And I think one thing we haven't been mentioning enough, but I think we need to more and more often here, is the effect of the absence of guys like Matt Jones and Emile Jefferson, where you can just tell, once that lead got under 20 points, I knew this was going to 10. Because the Blue Devils this season really haven't had that toughness that you need to close out teams. And it's very interesting because in the beginning of the season, yes, they weren't, world beaters as teams, but they came back against both Texas and Florida early on this season from big 15-point deficits. And in the Florida game, they did it twice. So they have shown a level of toughness. They just haven't been able to bring it back in quite some time.
So if you go back to the early, part of the year, so the 2 games you mentioned, plus of course the Michigan State team, I want that Duke team. And you want the maturation of the freshmen to be occurring certainly by game 25, and I'm not certain it's there. I will go back to a highlight in the last game, I guess it was against NC, where they are capable of moving that ball around the perimeter. There's this one sequence with about 2.5 minutes left in the game where there were 3 passes right around the perimeter, looking for that open man, and it just was bam, bam, bam. It was the most fluid play I have seen of Duke all year.
Right, and as I said, those are few and far between. The Blue Devils will play on Wednesday at home in Cameron against Virginia Tech, who's coming off a big win against Virginia, their rival. And hopefully the Blue Devils will have Marvin Bagley back and give a more consistent effort throughout all 40 minutes of the game, JD.
I certainly will be looking for that in the remainder of the games. I mean, I know that I could get a little down on the team, and I would have been saying the same thing last year before the ACC tournament when they were just unbelievable, and they came with that 4-game winning streak. I don't think any team ever did that in the ACC tournament, and it was just incredible, the run they had, and a lot of that was in the second half, especially with their incredible perimeter shooting. And I don't understand. Trent was 2 for 2 today, 3-point range. Why didn't they find him more, Jack?
I think that's another problem with the Duke offense, and as a whole, they don't do a good job finding each other and giving each other easy looks. And, whether that's been the case in previous games where I've talked about the lack of shots that Wendell Carter has had, or really, while Grayson hasn't shot the ball well this season, he does end up having to take a lot of tough shots. And so they don't do a great job of getting each other open good looks. And I think part of that is just the offense as a whole, as JD loves to talk about, doesn't have much flow. It doesn't swing back side to side or really move between players. It's usually just 2 or 3 guys who get to touch it per game. And so I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on. But one thing to remember is these guys are, for the most part, just freshmen. And it's their first season playing, college basketball. And so while, any activity really, when you're about 60 to 75% done with it, as we are in the season, is the hardest part of the activity. And for them, I think that's part of the freshman wall that we've seen them hit recently. And so I expect to see, they see the light at the end of the tunnel here. We're getting towards the end of the season. I think the effort level will start to come up and we'll see a rejuvenated Blue Devil team.
I certainly look forward to that against Virginia Tech. Hey, this is Jack. I'm JD.